Greetings gamers, and welcome to another Top 10 on the channel. This time we're taking a look at the Super Famicom and titles that were left in Japan. In the past on the channel I've done the Famicom, now it's time to take a look at the Super Famicom. Now you guys should know the rules if you've seen the previous videos. When I look at these games, I'm looking for games that do not have heavy text and are easy to translate on your own. No translation needed, so unfortunately, no surprises here, you're not going to see any RPGs. But you are going to see some good pick up and play games. So, without further ado, let's take a look together. Magical Poppin. Magical Poppin is not your typical platformer. There's an exploratory element in this game in the vein of 2D Metroid. There are alternate paths you can take to reach the end of stages. Sometimes you can skip portions of a stage and still complete it. Unfortunately, there is no battery backup or password system, but there are unlimited continues and a debug mode which offers a stage select in this game. What drew me to this game initially was the graphics. The sprite work is beautiful, every Magical Poppin character is lovingly detailed, and some of the background art is stunning. I also noticed the developers added depth to Poppin's character design by giving her different movement frames in special situations. For example, when you're teetering close to the edge of the platform, Poppin will try to balance herself so she won't fall off. Or when you don't move Poppin for a while, she'll begin to look bored. I really enjoy the cartoony graphics and Magical Poppin has it going on. This game is a fun but short experience. It's slightly marred by sometimes frustrating chain swinging mechanic and slowdown in spots, but the excellent graphics, music, and overall gameplay outshine these flaws. If you're a platformer or Metroidvania fan, you owe yourself to play this one. Rendering Ranger R2. This game starts off in a devastated, war-torn city with the player having to navigate their way through the streets, avoiding the odd bottomless pit and destroying enemy robots that come in many varied forms and directions until you face the inevitable boss. After the first two run-and-gun levels, you hop into a space fighter and the game becomes a fully fledged horizontal scrolling shooter with parallax backgrounds, asteroids, and enemies filling up the screen constantly. The graphics are all CGI models turned into two-dimensional sprites a la Donkey Kong Country. Rendering Ranger is a great hybrid of a regular run-and-gun game and superb shoot-'em-up. It looks absolutely incredible with detailed backgrounds and bosses up to 3 screens tall. The controls respond flawlessly, and there is no noticeable slowdown anywhere to be found. This game is a technical masterpiece that is much more than just eye candy and a great way to prove that the Super Famicom could indeed handle shmups as easily as the Mega Drive or PC Engine in the hands of the right developers. It's almost criminal that due to its very limited production run in Japan, very few people ever got to play this game. Doremi Fantasy. This game is the sequel to Milon's Secret Castle on the NES. Luckily, this game is nothing like the predecessor and is more of a Super Mario World clone created by Hudson Soft. The storyline is your typical damsel in distress routine. Milon must battle his way through various levels and encounter fiendish bosses in order to save his friend Eris the fairy and restore peace to the land. There are cutscenes in between levels that unveil more of the plot, which is a nice touch. The characters, enemies, and bosses have a great level of detail and the animations are faultless and smooth. The icing on the cake, however, is the backgrounds, which really impress with their soft pastel colors bringing the foreground to life. There are numerous little touches along the way that reinforce the love and care to detail that the developers put into creating this game. Your main weapon in the game is a bubble blower, which lets you encase an enemy and boot them off screen in bubble bobble fashion. In addition to this, you can also stun adversaries by bouncing off their heads. There are lots of secret areas to be found as you can break through certain blocks with your bubble blower. Before long, you'll come across a whole range of interesting power-ups to assist you in your quest. Doremi is one of the best examples of a platform game on the SNES and holds its own with favorites such as Super Mario World. With solid gameplay, level design, and atmospheric music, this game is a must for anyone who enjoys a good old-fashioned platformer. Ghost Sweeper Mikami. From what I gathered playing this game, you're a witch named Mikami, and you're going out and beating up on ghosts and recovering important relics. She's got a goofy friend and a blue-haired specter following her around. Anyway, you travel through a variety of levels beating up a bizarre cast of enemies to collect some mystic gems. Upon collecting them, a statue of some woman slowly gains more and more armor. Mikami is a trendy ghost-busting woman, since every level she'll be sporting a new fashionably colored dress. Every level has its own set of enemies, with very few making recurring appearances later in the game. A far cry from the palette swap goons seen in most games of the time. As for the gameplay, most levels are your basic side-scrolling action platformers. Your basic attacks are pretty limited. You have a standing attack, a crouching attack, a downward slashing move, and the ability to do a standing attack or downward slashing attack while jumping. A gimmick throughout the game are small platforms with candles and a paper seal attached to it where you need to perform an upward attack to latch on, then press jump to flip over and on top of the platform. This will allow you to reach parts of the stage you otherwise couldn't. There are some power-ups scattered throughout the level, and they'll be handy if you can hold on to them till the boss fight. They mostly just give you a projectile to fire and come in a variety of ranges. The bosses aren't too difficult once you get the patterns down. Luckily, you'll have plenty of chances since this game has infinite continues. This game is very fun and nice to look at. The soundtrack is pretty good and won't grate on your nerves anytime soon, and it controls pretty smoothly. The levels are nice and varied, starting you on a simple train and moving on to town rooftops, forests, industrial parks, and some crazy dreamlike stage. If you have the means and resources to play this game, I highly recommend you give it a whirl. Ghost Chaser Densei. The beat-em-up genre is one of my all-time favorites. There's something pure and satisfying about walking along, smashing bad guys, and looking really macho while doing it. The SNES received its fair share of solid beat-em-ups, but the Super Famicom brawler to never leave Japan is hands down Ghost Chaser Densei. You start off by selecting from one of three characters: the well-balanced male, the strong robot, or the quick token female. In most of these games I prefer the fastest character, but the main guy here is actually quite a hoot. What makes this game stand out from many others is the power meter system. Below your energy bar is another bar that depletes anytime you perform a special move, but your health meter is not compromised in exchange. I wish more games from this genre took notes from this. The power meter slowly regenerates, but if you stand still, you strike a pose and the power meter will recharge more quickly. So if you ever wish that a beat-em-up would allow you to do 360 spinning specials without penalizing your health, you will love this game. Some may call this system cheap, but I call it lots of fun. Plus there are multiple special moves at your disposal, giving this game far more range than any other of its time. Ghost Chaser Densei is a top-notch beat-em-up. It may look like a typical brawler on the surface, but when you have a separate special move meter, the ability to block, and tag team special moves, you are easily standing out in the beat-em-ups of the time. If you enjoy the genre and own a Super Nintendo, there's really no excuse not to have this in your collection. Kaite Tatsu Atsuren Dezaemon. Something like that. How would you like to make your own video game? Super Mario Maker was not the first time a company gave players the tools to produce their own interactive entertainment. This game is your early 90s Mario Maker style shoot-'em-up game. Jumping straight into the editors might be somewhat daunting right off the bat, so running the sample game that has 6 vertical scrolling levels to conquer using a range of different weapons is the best way to start this one. As you play, you might notice this game does not offer the spectacle of Axelay, but it certainly is a challenging and competent shooter. There's nothing wrong with having a by-the-book vertical scrolling shooter on the cartridge that serves not only as a great example of what this game can do, but also stands up as a decent product itself. Even though it is decent, it would not have made a place on this list without the editor, so let's go back to that aspect. If you've spent time doodling about in Mario Paint in the past, then you will feel right at home as this game wisely lifts most of the graphic editor and sound composer tools from Nintendo's unique offering. Opening the graphic editor will allow you to start designing parts of the game, namely your ship, weapons, enemies, main screen, and background tiles. The user interface is self-explanatory for the most part thanks to smart usage of common, easy-to-understand icons. You can edit all the existing graphics, or you can start a game from scratch. A clean canvas means that you will not be able to change something quickly and test it out Super Mario Maker style, but depending on your pixel art skills, it is the best way to truly flesh out something unique. Thanks to the game engine, even if your drawings are not up to your favorite pixel artist standards, it will still play well assuming you balance out enemy waves. Drawing the enemies is just a part, as how they behave and how they attack the player is what makes or breaks the challenge. You can assign movement patterns and types of shots enemies can throw at you, but once you realize that you can have enemies spawning other enemies, the possibilities quickly expand. The music editor could almost be a subject of itself. In fact, if you aren't an artisan of pixel art, you can skip that plan and just go make music instead. Once again, thanks to clean icons and great user interface, it's easy to understand what does what, and the fact that it is very much an enhanced version of the music composer from Mario Paint makes it incredibly simple to start composing your own tunes. Despite all this freedom to create, you are limited in some ways. For example, you really can't change the weapon systems beyond their cosmetic appearance, and you will always have 6 different weapon pickups, a shield, and a speed-up icon showing up in your game. This is not too bad considering the hardware and age of the game. At the end of the day, you get as much of this game as you put into it. To think there was a Super Famicom cartridge in the early 90s that gave you the ability to create your own vertical shooter without learning one line of code is pretty amazing. This game is truly one of a kind and should be a seriously considered addition to any Super Famicom collection that does not have it. Mickey and Donald Magic Adventure 3. This game is a side-scrolling platformer developed and published by Capcom for the Super Famicom exclusively in Japan on December 8, 1995. This game is a sequel to the Great Circus Mystery starring Mickey and Minnie, and the third, final game in Disney's Magical Quest trilogy. Magical Adventure 3 follows Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck as they traverse through Storybook Land to rescue Donald's nephews Huey, Dewey, and Louie from the evil King Pete. The game features a mix of platforming and action-adventure, and like its predecessors, the player is aided by different power-ups in the form of clothing. Along with a new fantasy setting, the game revamps both the 2-player co-op and magical costume mechanics by having each costume work differently for each playable character. For example, the Knight costume gives Mickey a lance with a globe that can attack in different directions and a shield. But the armor is too heavy and Mickey will sink in water. The same costume gives Donald a hammer that attacks in an arc and a barrel armor that lets him hide or roll over. Donald's barrel armor also floats in water. These differences really add to the replayability of the game, as opposed to previous titles where the character just did not impact the gameplay as much. This game was eventually ported to the Game Boy Advance as Disney's Magical Quest 3 starring Mickey and Donald, so whether you want to play this game on the go or on your TV, either way you will not be disappointed with this one. Little Magic. Little Magic is a Super Famicom puzzle game published by Altron. The protagonist, May, needs to take one more final test at her magic academy before graduating as a fully fledged witch. This exam takes the shape of a series of block-pushing tests where the trainee witch needs to use her magic to maneuver the block to where she needs it to be. The game plays similarly to the Adventures of Lolo, in that the player must thoughtfully pick a route for a sliding block without getting it or the player character stuck. May can use her limited magic to plant a bomb which pushes the block once, and can place up to 5 of these with timers. She's also capable of pushing the block herself, or one of her bombs, when standing next to it. Little Magic was eventually ported to the Game Boy in 1999, but neither version was officially localized or released outside of Japan. If you enjoy any type of puzzle adventure games, you will not be disappointed with this one. Super Dimension Fortress Macross Scrambled Valkyrie. This game is a horizontal scrolling shooter developed by Winkysoft and released in Japan in 1993. It is based on the Macross franchise, better known in the West as Robotech. The game is very import friendly due to what little text that's in the game is in English, more accurately English though. You start the game with a choice of 3 pilots. Each pilot has their own entirely unique weapon loadout for their VF-1 Valkyrie fighter. The VF-1 Valkyries are aircrafts that can swap between 3 distinct forms: a fighter jet, a half jet, half robot, and a full robot. Each form for each pilot has a single unique weapon, so swapping between forms becomes a huge part of the strategy in the game. When in the fighter jet mode, the Valkyrie has a smaller profile and moves swiftly. In half-jet robot mode, you have a slightly larger profile and move at a moderate pace, while in full robot mode, you have the largest profile and move the slowest. As you might imagine, the weapons complement the speed of your form, with faster choices having weaker weapons and slower having more powerful weapons. One of the more unique and interesting features of the game is the Minmay Cannon. If you remain motionless for approximately 1 second, your Valkyrie will become engulfed in a golden aura. Certain enemies will swap sides and join you in battle if they come in contact with the aura. As far as I was able to tell, once they become your ally, they are invincible and do not receive damage. You can only have 1 ally at a time, and they will fight alongside you as long as you do not die or recruit another enemy. Some of the enemies you recruit aren't very powerful, but some of the more advanced enemies later in the game can really bring the pain. It's really hard to find anything negative to say about this game. It looks beautiful, has great music, controls wonderfully, has a nice variety of weapons, offers a tough but rewarding challenge, and shows a lot of small touches and care that the developers put into it. There is also very little slowdown in the game, which is a pleasant surprise for this hardware. Super Genjin 2, aka Super Bonk 2. If you grew up with the TurboGrafx 16 back in the day, you'll be more than familiar with this character. This title is the sequel to Super Bonk on the Super NES. The core gameplay remains very similar to previous Bonk titles. Bonk still moves around at a slightly sluggish pace, and he still uses his noggin to bonk enemies that get in his way. But there are a few new gameplay wrinkles in this sequel that fans of the series should find quite entertaining. In Super Bonk 2, you can pick up power-up items that will transform you and use special abilities needed to complete the game's various levels. These range from frog goggles that allow Bonk's tongue to stretch out and stick to objects and platforms, to a drill hat that allows Bonk to tunnel through rocks. The controls in this game are extremely well executed. It will take those not familiar with the Bonk series a little time to adjust to a somewhat looser feel, but once you get a handle on it, the game is really a joy to play. The special abilities that Bonk can locate in each level really add a whole new level of depth to the game and give the gameplay a huge amount of variety. It's safe to say that Super Bonk is easily the most deeply playable Bonk title of them all, and it's also probably the most enjoyable. The visuals are quite impressive in Super Bonk 2. The game features multiple layers of parallax scrolling, and this adds a lot of depth to the scenery in each level. The enemies look great, but it's the bosses that really shine. They're not only mammoth in size, but their outlandish looks and devious attack patterns really make them stand out. It goes without saying that longtime fans of the series are in for a real treat with this title's fantastic visual presentation. If you're a fan of Bonk, Super Bonk is an absolute must-own and well worth the trouble of importing it from Japan. It's definitely the best Bonk title of the entire series and easily approaches some of the best platformers the Super Nintendo has to offer. The odd feel of the controls will take a bit of getting used to, but if you're willing to put in the time to give this game a chance, you're likely to find a game that you'll keep coming back to time and time again. Well, that's my top 10, guys. What games did you agree with on the list, and what games do you think I missed? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take it easy.